So the NCAA kind of poked Tennessee with a stick, and Tennessee pulled out a sledgehammer, man. Tennessee had a pool, and the NCAA had been diving into the shallow end the last few times against them, and they had no clue, the NCAA, that they dove into the deep end this time. I cannot believe we're going to do this, but we're going to do something in just a second that's normally reserved strictly for the regular season. But first, before Colin plays that track, just remember where we're at here. The NCAA didn't announce themselves the other day they were investigating Tennessee. They used essentially a spokesperson, or as you might know them, national college football writers, to announce that, hey, we're investigating Tennessee. Tennessee, about 15 minutes later, issued a scathing rebuttal, which the NCAA collectively looked at and said, uh-oh, they're not taking this like they took the Pruitt sanctions. Yeah, well, that's because those were valid, and according to Tennessee, these are not. So Dondi Plowman, the chancellor there, the other day you saw that she came out and said, we're calling BS on this. And the NCAA, spilled wine all over the front of their shirts. And then today, we had Danny White, who's the athletic director. He came out, and look at how fancy and pretty the graphic looks. We actually broke out the color printer for this. We have an orange-clad statement from Danny White, because Danny White looked around and said, hold on, Dondi Plowman made her statement, and Danny White said, hold my orange. And he made his own statement. Colin, the Sarah McLachlan special of February is Danny White's response to the NCAA. Follow me, kids. The NCAA, in Danny White's words, generally doesn't comment on infractions cases because there's a rule against it. However, that has not stopped them in the past from leaking info to the media, as they did this week about us. This is where it gets really good. Their actions made this ill-conceived investigation public and forced us to defend ourselves. It is clear the NCAA staff does not understand what's happening at the campus level. Truth bomb there. That's me talking. We continue. All over the country in the NIL space either. After reviewing thousands of Tennessee coach and personnel phone records, NCAA investigators didn't find a single NIL violation, so they moved the goalpost to fit a predetermined outcome. That doesn't sound like the NCAA we know. Continuing, they're stating that the nebulous, contradictory NIL guidelines written by the NCAA, not the membership, don't matter, and they're applying the old booster bylaws to collectives. If that's the case, then 100% of the major programs in college athletics have significant violations. This is obviously silly and not productive, as is blaming the membership whenever they're challenged. We need to be spending our time and energy on solutions to better organize college athletics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so basically what you're seeing here is pretty unprecedented. It used to be when the NCAA came after you, you just bent over and you had to take it. Didn't even matter if you thought you were innocent. It was like this monster behind the curtain. Somewhere along the way, someone jerked the curtain down, and you found out, no, the shadow looked like a monster. This is just a little baby dragon, or less. And all of a sudden, boy, when you take away all the fog and the fancy lighting and the CGI, and you just look at what the NCAA is, absent all that, it's not very impressive, is it? They don't have a leg to stand on in this case. Now, here's what I want to do, okay? So I know everyone's banging on the NCAA right now. I want to put my pen down for just a second. And I do want to say, I've heard from a lot of you, and I've heard from some people in the college administrative space, and they've said, hey, you need to be careful because, yeah, everyone's banging on the NCAA, but a lot of them don't know what they're talking about. That's true, okay? So I think this is one of those classic two things can be true at once deals where there's mob mentality that's taken over. It's always been popular to hate on the NCAA. So there's always this giant, very loud chorus of NCAA haterade. But if you turn everyone else's volume down real quick and just listen to individual voices, it's a lot of nothingness coming out of people's mouths. Like if I were to drill down and just pull one of you out who's screaming, death to the NCAA, screw the NCAA, I said, hey, what are your specific gripes? Well, they just suck. Okay, but specifically, what sucks about them? Well, they're just no good for college athletics. Yeah, but what is it? Like there's a healthy chunk of people who are yelling at the clouds right now about the NCAA who could not give you specifics about what they dislike. But that doesn't mean that the NCAA hasn't become a corrupted, kind of bygone organization that once upon a time served a much different purpose than they do now. It's just that maybe not everyone who feels that way can properly articulate it. I can articulate how I feel about the NCAA. So if anyone wants to challenge me on it, which two of my friends did yesterday, My response is, I think the NCAA wants you to be dumb enough to open the book at chapter 2. And chapter 2 of the book looks like the NCAA is enforcing rules that everyone asked them to make. And it's very much them having their hands tied behind their back because woe is me NCAA investigators are out here saying, well, you guys asked us to make these rules. Now we're trying to enforce them, and you're painting us as the devil. That sounds tough, doesn't it? In fact, if you didn't know any better, you'd look and say, dare I say the NCAA is the victim here? Well, you would if you were dumb enough to start on chapter 2 of the book, and they hope you are. We aren't. And so on this program, we generally like to start on chapter 1 of the book. Chapter 1 doesn't start yesterday, doesn't even start 5 years ago when things were already pretty messy. We can go back 20 years, guys. We can go back 20 years when some of the same folks occupying the same offices in that same organization in Indianapolis called the NCAA had an opportunity to make moves then. And you know how much they budged? Not an inch. And folks at the time, please don't try and whitewash history. Some forward-thinking people at the time, I remember being a kid, I remember being in high school and listening to this, were saying, if you don't give a little bit now, you're going to have to pay a lot. Down the road, you're going to have to pay a lot. And they didn't budge because they didn't think they needed to. Okay, so that's chapter 1, part 1. And then chapter 1, part 2 is come the mid-20-teens to late 20-teens, they panic because they're terrified and they're shook and the lights all of a sudden shone on them. And then they just boom, 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 made a bunch of rules all of a sudden. And then they kept changing them. And you've got folks in the administrative state within athletic departments saying, hold on, like what are the rules today? And also, they overhauled like portal and NIL and like 15 other things simultaneously. And it's like blowing up a dam and then warning the people in the town down here after you've already blown up the dam, hey, water's coming. And then afterwards, the entire town's swept away. And you're like, well, we told them the water was coming. We gave them a warning. Really? Well, that's not exactly how the story should be told. So that's chapter 1 of the book, which makes chapter 2 fit in its proper context. Now, the other part that's happening right now is you've got a chorus of people who are very concerned about the future of college football and college athletics. I'm one of them, at least as far as it pertains to being concerned about the future of the sport. You got some other folks, though, who are concerned, and they're saying, oh, really? Really, you want to go hate on the NCAA? Everyone wants to paint the NCAA as the boogeyman. What are you going to do when they're no longer around? Have you ever stopped to think that maybe without them, it'll be even more wild, wild west? I don't think there's a clear solution. Have never suggested otherwise. Also, you haven't heard me on this program or anywhere else say, let's just get rid of the NCAA tomorrow. Let's just abolish the entire organization. What I've said is it is a very mismanaged organization whose goals now are ill-conceived and don't align with their true mission statement. So I've thought a total overhaul of procedure has been necessary there. They haven't been motivated to do it. I haven't felt the NCAA is out for the best interest of either student athletes, as they call them, or college athletics in general for quite a while. This happens in the bureaucratic state quite often. It's not strictly relegated to just college athletics, but it's happening in college athletics. But what do I think? Well, I don't think you get rid of an enforcement branch of any governing body and just put a period on the end of the sentence. You've got to have rules. You've got to have enforcement. You've got to have guardrails. I know that. And I have told you for quite a while, if this is a transitional period, where I think you need to head is from what you got now to a world where conferences are tasked with policing themselves, which I got a fair amount of pushback on the other day. Oh, conferences are never going to police themselves, Josh. Actually, conferences are more equipped to police themselves than the NCAA is. So let me tell you what the talk really is behind the scenes. The talk really is most, probably 95% of coaches or player personnel types or even folks who can't go on the road and recruit but work on the staffs, they say, we'd actually love for this, or this to just be outlawed and be heavily punished if it's found to be done. But since it's not, we kind of have to play ball on it. to give you a very, very small glimpse into much bigger conversations that are happening, I've never thought the NCAA possesses the ability to police that. The conferences do, though. And I'll also tell you this, being pretty vague about it. Conferences already police themselves. You just don't see it. Greg Sankey has a lot that is plopped in his lap on an annual basis that never makes it to NCAA headquarters because it is SEC business and it's one SEC program or coach gripe against another SEC program or coach, and it's handled internally. That happens quite frequently. I think it could happen on a much broader scale, and I think it could happen in the Big Ten, and I think it could happen in the ACC. So anyway, this whole Tennessee NCAA thing, I don't think it's going to be the death of the NCAA. I don't think the NCAA is blowing up tomorrow. Don't think that at all. I just think there's going to be a radical overhaul of how we define what the NCAA does. And let me tell you one other word that no one ever mentions, and that's liability. Liability is a big reason the NCAA exists. Right now, if I'm playing football for Vanderbilt and I'm getting hurt or certain things happen to me or I'm involved in certain things and it gets litigious in nature, right now, that NCAA logo sometimes is the one that has to fit the bill for that. Sometimes is the one that has to stand up in front and take all the arrows. That's valuable. No one cares about it. If you're a fan, you don't care about that. But trust me, people in that administrative state, they do care about that. People at the conference level, they do care about that. The NCAA serves many more purposes than just governance and regulation. It's just that's the stuff we care about. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I just think it could be drastically overhauled.